I will close this out. Um, so again, thank you to Ajahn Nandra. And you know what? I think the thing to remember is that today we had three people who have three different perspectives, and so is it worth it? My perspective is completely different. Let me summarize my perspective. I've never went to โรงเรียน Thai. I did not go to โรงเรียน Inter. So I do not know all of that kind of experience. Okay. So when I went to medical school, it was just like what you do, because I grew up as an American. And then you go to medical school, and then that's the next step, is that you have to go to training. You cannot be a GP in the US. You cannot practice medicine without having a board certification. So that was just the next step. It wasn't like, oh, I need to do this whole bunch of things to accomplish this. It was the next step. It's just like you went to high school, you then went to college, etc. So that is my perspective. So when people come to ask me, should I do this, I cannot answer that, because I, of course, am going to have a completely biased answer. So back to what I'm saying is, you have to ask yourself. You have to ask yourself if this is something that you want to do, because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of money that you have to invest in, and you have to see if it's good for what you want to do. So the point is to give you just an overview and give you an idea. Okay, so what is the American Board? So, and then I'm going to touch upon so that you know, I don't think a lot of medical students really know what you do after year 6. And I think that you're just kind of thrust into this, and then you like go with the flow until you realize, oh, it's a lot. So I'm sure everybody saw on the news, some like 5th-year medical student died last week, right? And if you looked at the comments, people were like, oh, แต่เขาปี 5 แล้วอ่ะอีกปีเดียวก็จบ. Not really. You have to do an intern year, 1 to 3 intern years, and then even if you want to do a residency, that's another 10 years. So it's a very common misconception that you just go to medical school and then you're like a doctor, like on TV, because it's not. So my point is that everywhere it's a marathon. I know that half of you have your iPad open because you have some test coming up, and you really have to know this histology slide. They're going to ask about the protons or whatever they ask. I don't know. But in the long scheme of things, you're going to have to do this for additional 5 to 6 years, and it does not end. So take a break, take a breather, take a deep breath. Okay? So what is the American Board? All it is certification in a specific specialty, right? So if you want to be a plastic surgeon, if you want to be an internist, if you want to be a cardiologist, etc., you can actually, there's a whole website that you can see, because I want to say this as well, like everything that you see on social media that's an American Board is not the true American Board that people are talking about. There's like the American Board of Anti-Aging. That is not what we are talking about. That is not part of the American Board of Specialties. There's anti-aging and like hair restoration. That is not. That's something separate that I don't know about. Okay? And I can say it here instead of TikTok and people like being mad. So just this is what US students do, and I'll compare it to what you guys do. So in the US they have to go to college, and then they have to go to med school for additional 4 years. So they have 8 years, and then you have training for, again, 3 to 7, the longest being neurosurgery, which is the same thing in Thailand. Neurosurgery is the longest training in Thailand, so it's probably the longest overall. So prepare yourselves. If you want to be a neurosurgeon, then you have fellowship 1 to 3 years. So that's just kind of the pathway. So I think I tell you this only so you know what the counterpart does, and you know what they've experienced. So one thing is that, at the end of the age, when you finish training, we're all around the same age. You're like 30s. And you might think you're very young now, but 30s is going to come out pretty quickly. And because in Thailand, you'd have to do 1 to 3 years in ใช้ทุน and then you can go do training. Okay, so this is how their setup is. It's usually preclinical. They do 2 years and then do 2 years of clinical. But I think since I went to medical school, it has shifted, and they try to do more clinical. But I'm not sure when they start that. But it's step 1, step 2, which is the same thing as NL. And then, like Atanantra said, then you can take step 3 after you've already finished, before you train or during your training. Most people are required to take step 3 during your training. So in Thai medical school, this is how it's set up. Again, you guys start right out of high school, but you have 6 years of medical school, and then you can become an intern. And then the other thing is to know, like, all the options of becoming an intern. Like Kanachai, he became an intern at Sirilat, but he taught like preclinical sciences. And then a lot of EP students or English program students are recruited, or they somewhat recruited to teach that, because now Jula has an international program and they need doctors who speak English well to teach those students. Okay? And then in 2 years ศิริราชเขาจะเปิดหลักสูตรอินเตอร์เหมือนกัน so then they need, I'm sure, more people to teach in English. So after you get your MD in Thailand, what you have ใช้ทุน 2-3 ปีมันแล้วแต่สาขา right? Because it all depends onขาดแคลน. What if like this สาขา nobody really wants to เรียน บางที I think they have where you don't have to ใช้ทุนเต็ม. Okay? But then you have to do residency for additional 3 to 5 years. So you end up being the same age as somebody who trained in the US. So you're about the same age once you finish. So there's no really a great shortcut in the life of a doctor. This was my schedule when I was like first, second year. I just put that on there so you can see it's the same stuff. So that's another thing. It's all the same stuff, right? And I will tell you this, Ajahn Nanta spoke a good topic, is that I think in the US, the who you know is not who you know แบบที่ไทยมันต้องมีเส้นแบบ this person whatever, but it's like this person can speak on your behalf that this kid is good, and then from that point on they know, oh, we took this kid from this place, etc. Does that make sense? Right? So if Nong Nat, he does a great job, and then some person randomly applies in 2 years and they're like, oh, this person's from CICM, that kid Nut was from this same place, so he must have like a barometer of how well the student is. Does that make sense? It's not like, last year they released the scores of Gosopotol and then they said, oh, Jula Thanta man di kwaแบบรามาแพทย์. It doesn't, like, no one cares about that. I know that my mom went to Sirilat, and she would tell everybody เขาก็จบ Sirilat. When we grew up in America, and I was like, I don't even know where Sirilat is. And I was like, I don't think these random white people know either. But my point is, it does not matter when you go there, because they know that you're from Thailand, and then they're going to be like, okay, maybe we've had a resident from Thailand or from this specific medical school. It's the same thing. So I think you can take that factor out. And again, I'm speaking from someone who did not grow up in Thailand. So that is a factor that I think is misconception. Like, not to think that, oh, just because I'm at Thammasat, I cannot do this. Okay? Because there's a lot of that, right? Remember when they played that game show, The Bone? And did y'all watch that game show? And there was like one med school, like, they were like, oh, they only got 2 out of the whatever questions, right? And then people were like, oh, because that med school is not good. And you're like, that's rude. And that's rude. And that is part of Thai culture, which is just to like rank everybody. So one thing I recommend that you to do is that we will actually sponsor if anybody wants to take a trial USMLE. Like when you're in L1, we had someone take it because it costs a lot of money. You should know these tests cost like $1,000 probably now per test. So not only you just don't want to like be taking it all the time, but it costs a lot. And once you pass, that's a score that will stay with you forever. If you fail it, that's also going to be a red flag that will stay for you forever, even if you were an American graduate. Okay? So you have to practice test questions. I think succeeding in its standardized test. And so there's a specific way to take standardized tests. So yes, so if you're coming on year 3 and you're taking the NL and you want to see if you could be successful in taking, because we had students that would take the NL and they also took the USMLE Step 1 at the same time to see where they would land. And some did okay and some did less than okay. It's the same body of knowledge, but you have to understand it's how the question is asked. Okay? So I think it's a good idea to predict your test score. So all these students now, like we have at least I think 2 students in the cycle, meaning 2 CICM alumni in the cycle this year to apply for residency. So they look at where they're landing on the test score because you need to predict it for when you take the real test. Okay. So the match, I put this up there so that you understand the match, and I know Nut has already, it's not, so in Thailand you apply directly. And then you interview, if they invite you to an interview, and then at least in ENT, เป็นรอบๆ and they were talking about this today, like how can we identify residents who might have a problem, and we've spoken about this in medical curriculum, how to identify students that will have trouble in medical school, because you don't want to take someone and then they can't successfully complete it. Okay. And I think it's hard because everything is so quick. But how the match works, I think they won a Nobel Prize, whoever made up this algorithm many, many years ago, because what it does, it takes what the preference of that individual and it matches it with a computer with the preferences of Sataban. Okay? So like, if you apply to this place, if you apply all over, you apply to, some people apply to like 10 places, 20 places, and it costs money. So this all costs money. And then you apply, and then they will invite who they want to interview, and then you will rank them on a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they will rank them on a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the computer does it. And then everybody in the match knows at the same time, the same day all over the world. So in US medical schools, they make you go up on stage and open it in front of their whole class. It's horrible. Like if you didn't get something that you liked, it's a completely, I think it's a completely bad way to end the day if you didn't have a good day. But so the thing that you understand is, I know this is a lot over your head right now, but, and Atanantra, not he mentioned this, but IMGs would be international medical graduates, so anyone who didn't graduate medical school in the US, and then they then separate it from those who have a US passport and those who do not. Why is that important? Because it talks about having a visa. And you know America right now is super anti-immigration, so they are like not being nice about having a visa. So that comes into play. So because why? Because it costs money. So if the institution will have to pay for a visa for that individual, so that takes away from money. And you're like, oh, that's the same way ใช้ทุน ถ้าเด็กมีทุนแล้วเขาไปเรียนไอ้สถาบันไม่ต้องจ่ายเขาก็ต้องให้เด็กที่มีทุนอยู่แล้ว It's the same thing. So that's how the whole world works, right? It's all, but the other thing that you have to reflect upon is that, am I wanting to go into a specialty that would be possible in the US? So if you look at dermatology is super hard in Thailand already. Dermatology is super hard there. right now, but in 10 years that could shift. Why? Because AI. You could take a picture, I tried this, you can take a picture of a scab, of a rash, and put it in Chat GPT, and it will give you what they think it is. So I don't know, but that could change how the workforce changes and how things are competitive. So what you should look at, so if you're looking at non-US IMGs, if you pick a random thing, so take family medicine. There's 800 programs in family medicine. There's 5,000 or so positions. 800 of went unfilled. That means they went unfilled. No one matched into there, so they're open spots. So non-US IMGs, 2,000 of them applied for those 5,000, and then 800 got in. So 800 of the 4,000 are non-United States international medical graduates. So that's how you look at the percentage, okay? But again, and Ajahn Nandra mentioned this, nothing is out of impossible. There's a neurosurgery resident at Duke from Thailand, but he also got a PhD, I think. I saw this talk about a kid. I say kid, maybe they're just younger than me. But he is an orthopedic surgeon in New York City who, because he gave a talk to Bangkok Hospital, like online, he may have went to international school, and then he went and did college. He was like super smart. He went to like Johns Hopkins, and then he went to med school at some Ivy League school, and then he's an orthopedic surgeon, and then he went to residency and fellowship. So that's another example. So there are many examples of people like Ajahn Nandra talked about her friend that was the surgeon. I met him before when I was in the US randomly. He's like a transplant surgeon. And I know another surgeon who's a general surgeon, and what she told me, she's like, she just kept trying. Like, it's very hard to get into general surgery for non-US grads. And this person told me that she just kept trying. She would do transitional years. Like, transitional years mean you spend a year there, and that's your contract is 1 year. She should do that over until this program got to know her and said, okay, we'll give you a chance and we'll take you. So that's how you display like perseverance. Okay. So I think that's why I think they say US is the land of opportunity, because even if you're poor, if you have disadvantage, you can somehow make it out. Okay, so this is data that we looked at, but if you can look at, so non-US citizens, international medical graduates, you can see how many applicants, and then match just means they got in, and then unmatched. So if you say around 10,000, so NUT is like one of that 10,000 people, and so they have like an acceptance rate of only 50%. So non-US IMGs have a 50% acceptance rate. 50% of them don't make it. They went through the whole process, which is long. And yeah, things you should know about, like 2 years ago, there was a cheating scandal about the USMLE because they noticed discrepancies in the scores that came out of Nepal. So they voided all the USMLE scores from Nepal, like a specific country. But so you're competing against a wide body of people who are trying to potentially go and do this. And even when I was in med school, there was a resident who was from China who was already a pediatric surgeon and now was doing residency in pediatrics. That's a very big jump. And so, yeah. Again, you could go and study this list if you were bored, but you can see that for the past however many years, how it has changed. This is important for people, we have people online who are listening, and I think I think personally the USMLE score is the gold standard that they're looking at, because in Thai, doctors usually score in the 90th percentile to begin with. So, but you can see nowadays step 1 is pass fail, so they don't care. You just have to pass it. Step 2 is we're gonna put all your eggs in, because you have to do a really good score there, because that's why it's standardized tests. And what's the word standardized? It's standardized from a global standpoint. So they've tested it for years. They look at which questions are appropriate, which questions are inappropriate, and then that's how you get a calculated score amongst all your peers, because that's the only way you can compare, right? This person you went to Tiem Udom, and then you went to, I don't know, NIST. How can you compare that? And there's a bunch of grade inflation. It's not fair. So that's a worldwide problem, not just isolated here. So that's the only way that you can tell the thing apart. And then what Tanata was talking about, all these research things. Yeah, I think research has gotten a little bit out of hand, even in the US, because if you look at people who master, like, I published 5 things, no, I will tell you, kids in high school are applying to medical school, and on their portfolio it has, like, I published in whatever journal about something. And I was like, how is that even possible? And how do you even know enough, unless you're like a genius, of what this is even talking about? And how did you write a published article? Which I also understand there's tutoring places that help this with students, which I don't think that that's helpful. And it's just a bunch of mush. So yeah, you have to see if the research you're doing has, like, impact, and is that actually changing something? Because that's the whole point of it. Otherwise, you're just producing stuff, like publishing a magazine. Okay? So the application process, that's a little bit about the application process. Basically, I think you have to get to the score, and then you have to be able to represent yourself. Okay? So when, not before he went there, we would just practice interviewing, because it's a very sharp difference from how it is in Thailand, because I interview residents for Thailand, and they'll be like, มีแฟนหรือยัง พ่อแม่ทำอะไร and now, which technically you can't even ask those type of things, because then that's like, it's inappropriate. But you can get inappropriate questions there too. But I think interviewing in specifically, it's American culture, which is different from European or other places in Asia, and especially in Thailand. You have to understand how their culture works and how to be able to converse, because it's a lot of small talk, right? Or small talk, and you have to fill the void. The last thing you want to do is just silence, because then that's very unnerving. And I think most people, they just want to know, is this someone that, because they've already bypassed the scores, they've already bypassed your academic record. Everybody's smart. You're all doctors, right? Everybody's smart to some degree to get to that point. So now they need to know, is this person that I can work with for the next X amount of time? Is this someone that the residents can work with for the next X amount of time? And I think you have to relay that. So what we would practice were like, what are your hobbies? What happened if I asked you, what do you want to gain from coming here? Do you know about the program? Those type of things. This is just, I pulled this, but you can see, like, a lot of places it depends on the visa requirement, and also depends on how many years you've graduated from medical school. So, the further you are from medical school, your chances decrease. And then there's different, I think not talked about this, but there's, a large medical center versus a community program has a different experience, and that might impact if you want to be a cardiologist, if you want to be a gastroenterologist, if you want to be subspecialized. This is just interviewing, and I think this is important in general. You have to know your own profile, and you have to know what's going on in the world and just how to be able to converse, which I think a lot of you guys probably have experience doing that. I pulled this from the Facebook, but you can see that a lot of the Thai-friendly programs, the big ones are Texas Tech and the University of Hawaii. And then there's one in Pennsylvania that have traditionally taken a lot of Thai people. So it's good to look at all of this as, free data that's available that you can just look at, and it gives you an idea. So you can see, most people go in internal medicine, but you have other people who go in other specialties. This is just to show that you can start whenever you want to start, but we just did this paper. This was a long time ago, I think. But now, Moss was in the first, they're both in the first Runlaka. And one is studying, I think, in a master's, and then the other one is going to be staff next year. He's a pediatric geneticist. That's it. So, this was just when I was a resident. I think, there's good and bad, and you just have to pick something that is good for you. Not good for your parents, good for you. So that's it. So if anybody has any questions, otherwise, we are here.